Now we're on the new African family. So my inference is, how do new Africans engage in family stuff? I'm assuming. Oh my gosh, there's another one. An ethno-state. Bro, the United States is a white Christian ethno-state. It's about liberation. Maybe you should read the book and maybe even understand what is the Republic of New Africa. Instead of making your assumptions, go read, because they're colonized. So liberation, national liberation, is one of the key factors. And where were black people put to? What land were they till when they were enslaved? So again, read the book. Investigate what they really want. Jesus Christ, people. Ethno-state! Like, bro, you're fucking reactionary. Stop being reactionaries. The new African family, black nationalism of diverse perspectives, developed ideas about the black family during the 1960s and 1970s. Oh my dude, again, here bro, check this out. I'm gonna help you real quick. I've always wanted to do this to you. Go read, bro. Go fucking read. Jesus fucking Christ, dude. Fucking pieces of shit. All right, let me start again. Black nationalism of a diverse perspective developed ideas about black families during the 1960s and 1970s. Among them, the Nation of Islam, Maluanan Karanga, and the U.S. organization, US organization, and the Black Panther Party, insomuch as they were nationalists, have been the subject of study. The scholarship in these organizations demonstrate that although there were some distinctions between the organizations depending on their political and culture emphasis, many of them had the same core tenets about family, which include the following. At their foundations, families were heteronormative and consisted of a man, a woman, or woman, and especially children. Oh my God, are you serious? You came back? Are you fucking kidding me? You came back. That's what you did. You fucking, oh my God, bro. Bro came back. Damn. Predatorial, would you say? You can leave now if you want. Please leave, in fact. The scholarships on these organizations demonstrated that although there were some distinctions between organizations depending on their political and culture emphasis, many of them had the same core tenets about family, which included the following. At their foundation, families were heteronormative and consisted of a man, a woman, or women, and especially children. A family may have included immediate relatives, very close friends, and or comrades in the involvement. Next, strong black families were vital to the overall success of black liberation struggles. Finally, black families were discouraged from looking to Euro-America and or capitalist models of family as inspirations in building their own. Independent theorists worked these conceptions of family into the New African political science. Oh wow, they got taken out. I wonder why. Huh. Gandhi and Amir Obadel developed ideas that fit with the broader black nationalist trend in their time and attempted to reimagine black marriage, looking first to, quote, African traditions, as well as their contemporary socio-political needs and values for the black nation. The People's Center Council approved a new marriage as an opportunity to build new African families in the ways that would be distinct from American and European models and norms. Look at that, more people. They just keep coming back. Wait, what page? 162. Because they argued the Creator had established the sexes with the explicit purpose of creating new life. And due to the slightly greater proportion of women to men, polygamy was acceptable in the nation once independent. Besides, polygamy would ensure that each woman had access to a man, and no women would be forced to resort to same-sex intimacy. Yet Brother Amir attempted to distinguish New African marriage from traditional marriage of this sort. He argued that the New African version would respect women's rights to be as free as men if they wanted to maintain multiple intimate relationships outside the marriage. He also claimed that New African Ujamaa would ensure women's economic survival independent of a husband or another patriarch. In these ways, he hoped that marriage and New African families could conform to a anti-sexist aspect of the Republic of New African Declaration of Independence and other founding documents. The Odel's approach to marriage was more about permission than it was a mandate in which everyone had to adhere. Yet the concept of polygamy and the aspects of, quote, free love that also found a home in the New African political science became ideas with which New Africans had to negotiate. Most people did not seem openly interested in participating in these arrangements. Tafa decided against using the name Ajinaku because of its connection with polygamous families in Tennessee. From Jackson, the Republican New African stance on polygamy was one of the factors that prevented her from becoming a citizen of record. However, other women, like Queen Mary Moore, responded favorably to men's having multiple wives. Afine Shakur, a Black Panther and conscious New African, entered into a polygamous relationship which was based more on her husband's religion, he was Muslim, than on any black nationalist ideologies. She stated that in her biography that the arrangement was problematic for her because of the pain it caused the other women, not because she disagreed with the principle. Further, men like Afric and Abdur Rashid built families, each with one woman at a time, and seemed to value one-on-one marriages. And although he initially saw it was his right to be in an open marriage, Chakwi Lubumba came to realize that his embrace of free love caused more pain to his wife than it was worth. I think they got into Florida already. Redo the Confederacy? Yes, black people want to redo the Confederacy against white people. Are you scared now? Are you scared, Ryan? Are you scared? Read the book! Jesus fucking Christ, people. One New African man, General Rashid, agreed with the idea that a man should be allowed to take more than one wife. He explained that during the 1970s, two of his wives were security personnel. And this is him. I will talk about one of them because she's a major figure in what we were trying to make her some kind of Queen Mother Moore of the military. She was highly skilled. She was. In that group, she was the oldest wife, and she was older than most of the females in the military. She was one of the first national trainers that we had. I'm talking about that was a female that had both male and females under her command. She solved the problems herself. If a brother did something to disobey her rule, she told him told him to go get his gear. She got beat up a lot of times, but she got the respect. It's a separation from the United States completely. It's a decolonization away from the United States and the dismantlement of the United States. The reference of Queen Mary Moores is important because it indicates how much respect Rashid's wife had earned within the security structures of the Republic of New Africa. Even as he acknowledged that he held many sexist views in his lifetime, Rashid never doubted that women could serve in the military positions with men. He emphasizes on his legionnaire wives is instructive of how he tried to negotiate his admitted sexism with the needs of the movement. Next, Rashid argued that having multiple wives has consistent with his religion, Islam. He stated, quote, "I am a Muslim. I believe in polygamy, but I don't believe in pimping. You understand? And one reason I don't practice polygamy now is, quote, cause it can get expensive. Cause if you do not do it according to the Quran, you have to take care of them. Whatever that family is that she brings you, you have to take care of them. So that can't get expensive." Rashid distinguishes his practice of polygamy from sexual exploitation and argues that he was never interested in running around with several women simply for the sake of controlling their sexuality and reproductive labor. Instead, his relationships with his wives included the responsibility to providing for each woman and whatever, quote, she brings to the arrangement, more specifically her children. General Rashid explained that he had 20 children and 7 or 8 of them were his biologically. The remainder came into his family through his wives. In addition to the potential expense, he claimed that polygamy is not a practice accepted by the larger society, and he would not want to do anything to bring this harmony into the community. Therefore, he stopped entering such unions. In some ways, Rashid's comments were in line with patriarchal views and concomitant structures that various feminists challenged vigorously during the 1960s and 1970s. Yet there are some aspects of his outlook that departed from traditional sexist logic. Bloop, 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 bloop. Where was I at? There it is. Even if some of his most sexist movements during the 1960s and 1970s, he always advocated for what black feminist Linda LaRue called, quote, role integration. Here we go. He believed in giving women the same responsibilities, protections, and promotions within the provincial government, Republic of New Africa, that were guaranteed for men. Supporting this take, Marilyn Killingham cited Rashid with being the most vocal advocate and supporter of her unsuccessful run for the presidency of the provincial government, Republic of New Africa, in the 1980s. During our conversation, he was where's this word? Adamant. Let me look up this word, everybody. Just real quick. Right back. adamant about giving both men and women credit for the contributions that made to the New African International Movement and the Provincial Government Republic of New Africa. Considering Rashid's belief in the Republic of New Africa's Declaration of Independence and his participation in the Legion, he likely came to admit and attempted to modify his sexism based on ethics, demanding that men respect women as their equals in revolutionary struggles and combat. But one must keep in mind that Rashid's anti-sexist stance pertained to the struggles for black liberation, not to his personal or home life. Quote, "We had the government," he explained, "and we had businesses to take care of. We have businesses to take care of, and we was pretty disciplined in terms of leaving the baggage at the door when we was entering the arena of liberation struggle, and we got to be pretty good at that. So I never had no problem with none of my wives. The baggage they left at the door included disputes that occurred within their household that General Rashid believe they were able to prevent such tensions from getting in the way of their liberation struggle responsibilities, suggests that they valued New African independence enough to try to keep their family strife, quote, at the door, end quote. Rashid's comments apparently challenged the concepts of their personal being political. His advocacy of separating his public and private spheres make it seems as though he applied two different philosophies depending on whether he was at work or at home, including with regard to the wife of whom he spoke so highly of. She still ranked lower than he did. She ultimately had to follow his orders, not the reverse. As he did in their home arrangement, he maintained a dominant position in their political relationship. Unimportantly, some New Africans have critiqued the provincial government for the broader trend of male dominance and a dismissal of women's ideas, especially when they were critical of the provincial government or the movement. Babi Hannibal Efric also maintained a traditional patriarchal family. Although he did not have multiple wives, apparently very few men did, during the mid-20th century, he insisted on building his family according to the conventional breadwinner and housewife paradigm. He was the sole head of his household who instituted a family's migration from semi-contented liberal Americans of black revolutionary nationalists. When he became active in the movement, he began to strongly identify as African. His wife and his children did the same. In particular, once he and his comrades created an independent school, Afric's wife, quote, saw the benefits and she began to become more supportive. From there, he and his family changed their names, began to dress differently, and exchange European traditions for African-inspired ones. As he explained, quote, I told my kids, we ain't celebrating Christmas no more. And when people would say, quote, Merry Christmas, what did you want for Christmas? They had enough strength to say, we don't celebrate Christmas. We celebrate Kwanzaa. But that was because of the reinforcements my wife and I being on the agreement and the children following our examples. And when they saw they could get Kwanzaa gifts, that made it more palpable. In some ways, Afric's dedication to the movement and his views allowed for harmony within his family. Still, discourse periodically caused havoc within the Afric's family because of the large amount of energy Babi Hannibal placed in the liberation movement and the transition the family underwent because of their rapid changing views and the dangers of being a black revolutionary in the 1960s and 70s. Even though his wife respected him enough to allow him to lead the family into that turbulent arena, Africa admitted that he, quote, made a whole lot of mistakes trying to be revolutionary, jeopardized my family, my job, and my wealth. But in retrospect, I spent 18 years doing doubly duty at work, at school, and at shul, the African-centered independent school. Almost destroyed my marriage and my family, resources, and all that. Many would probably consider Baba Hannibal and his family a model for others to follow in the movement, consistent with the New African Oath. He dedicated most of his resources to the movement, both in independent school he was helping to run, and because of the roles he served within the provincial government, his family seemed to adopt as his views evolved, and even though they went through many transitions, they were able to maintain their family unit. Saku Owiso described his new African family as fully embracing, yet going beyond the specific guidelines of the national New African political science. He indicated, quote, you have the creation of the new man, the new woman. So the whole thing was a rebirth about New Africa. That's why it's the Republic of New Africa. So during the whole movement, things that goes beyond just the creation of the Republic of New Africa is the idea that we gotta be new people, new birth. We gotta take new values. We gotta get the slave master stuff off. That's always been in the theme of the movement of black nationalism. The newness of which Owasua spoke sought to be comprehensive and inclusive, instead of choosing, say, economic nationalism as a singular path of self-determination, something that New African families was supposed to embody and reflect. Owusu, I'm trying to do it, emphasized the importance of independence in everyday life of New African families. The household should be, quote, that place where you're supposed to value that is more African as far as your motif. M-O-T-I-F. You're supposed to read a certain type of way. You're supposed to try new values in the sense that you're not supposed to bring all that stuff from off the street, running around with other women and that type of stuff. This includes celebrating Kwanzaa or some other holidays that are relevant to you. Instead of or in addition to Christmas, his ideal New African family dressed differently, rejected slave names, educated the children in independent schools, and was involved in political organization that helped the community. In other words, quote, you're no longer European, so that's that kind of step out the box, the being independent. I guess that's the sense of the whole movement in general. We got to be independent, separate ourselves from white America. Although the practices that Owusu mentioned were not unique among New Africans, the conscious desire to perform them in concert with achieving statehood distinguished New Africans from the Black Power formation. As a nation, the Republic of New Africa presented independence activists with opportunities to openly embrace a variety of nationalist tenets while still pursuing their distinctive territorial objectives. New Africans have had varying degrees of success in achieving this ideal, especially when assessing their children's acceptance of New African political science. Obokaba Trace suggested that his children demonstrate at various aspects of their lives that they have embraced New African political science, or at least black nationalism, more broadly. Quote, all of our children have African names. I have 4 children, 7 grandchildren. Many of my grandchildren have African names, so they were raised in an African household, new African household. And as youngsters, they traveled with me to conferences and conventions around the country. So we didn't celebrate Christmas in our household. We celebrate Kwanzaa. We were raised in a very cultural African surrounding. His oldest son, especially, has shown interest in the agreement with Bukabu's political beliefs by giving his children African names, deciding to wear African clothing, and remaining intellectual and socially engaged with the black community and its struggle. Trice's other children accepted these ideas in a subtler ways, which as by giving their children new African names. Let me see what's going on here. Hey, Pooh. Okay. All right. Yeah, I would say that it does, especially separate. Especially when you're trying to break away from European standards and a white supremacy settler colonial nation, you know what I mean? So, I am agreeing with this. Plus, it's not my job as a person to go in and be like, no, black people, you're doing it wrong. That's not my job. I'm not supposed to do that. You know, I'm supposed to learn and educate myself. All right, I'm doing a book reading, Cranberry Frog, so we're not having people up. So, sorry about that. Eneb, Kositile, I can't say the name right, did all that she could to raise her son in black liberation and African-oriented spaces. It was important that he be educated outside of the American mainstream, so she and several comrade educator created the African-centered school, originally named Alexandria Crummell Center, and became Ashia Shul / Du Bois Preparatory Academy, and functioned from 1974 to 2013. After high school at Cass, the young man attended the historically black Tuskegee Institution, now Tuskegee University, where he studied physics and created a technology company, Motown Wireless. According to Kagase-Style, he has used his enterprise to set up technology hubs in black neighborhoods, whereby community members could learn technology while assessing resources that benefit their communities. The company states that it would like to bring, quote, low-cost internet access, hardware, and digital education to Detroiters. He has also volunteered at African-centered schools and has enrolled his daughter into one. Quote, so he's one of the babies and is on the babies team. Where, oh my gosh, I wonder if the case on it, Kogos-Style explained with pride that her son is, quote, very happy to have been brought up in the culture and to have what kind of grounding. However, passing on the knowledge of New African political science could not guarantee that the recipients would accept, internalize, and apply it in the ways their parents may have hoped. Killingham, for example, tried to raise her son as a New African. However, he rejected the overt aspects of the New African political science, especially its position in racial solidarity, New African self-determination, and the war against white supremacy, which he considered racist. He preferred liberal notions of multiculturalism, which he thought was more in line with his Muslim faith. Killingham's only child converted to Islam as a college student during the 1980s. He came to understand any type of racial pride as contrary to the will and purpose of Allah. On the other hand, he embraced the idea that capitalism is destructive. Again, he couched his reasons in Islam as opposed to New African political science. For Khalid Abdur Rashid, the ability to raise his children was complicated despite having a wife and a father-in-law who both pledged allegiance to the Republic of New Africa and lived according to the New African political science. Abdur Rashid raised his children to be proud New African citizens, even though they did not embrace it in the ways that he originally imagined. A revolutionary nationalist, he met and married a cultural nationalist woman named Dina Reverend Barashogo, Ashikamausa's daughter. They met when her group, Pure Black Poets, performed at an event Baba Khalid helped organize. He courted her through a series of letters he sent her when he was jailed following a demonstration at Black Gerard Avenue in North Philadelphia. He recalled, quote, "When I came home, she said, you coming over?" He exclaimed, "I'll be right there." Then, confirming the depths of his Philadelphia upbringing and his excitement, he added, "I walked." Together, they sought to bring the cultural nationalist and revolutionary nationalist together for the cause of New African independence. The two gave their 4 children's names such as Lumumba, Naisha, Name, and Ashika Muso, which were inspired by religious figures and loved ones in the liberation struggle. They also participated in New African independence activities such as meetings, physical fitness routines, and military training. But Khalid and his children point out that he did much more. He was a peacemaker in his DC and Philadelphia communities. He was and continues to be Baba to dozens of children and their parents. Baba Khalid's children grew up in the movement, and the younger ones seemed to attract their peers because they were doing physical training. What's that say? Orienteering and learning self-defense. I don't know what that. Something that Alajo, here we go, Debagola loved doing with Abdur Rashid's children. Other children in the neighborhood were exposed to the teachings and trainings, and it did not hurt that at least one of Abdur Rashid's children had the reputation as, quote, Karate Kid, because of his ability to handle himself in scuffles. Whenever the New African parents learned about such violent altercations. He attempted to use them to build friendships between brothers instead of allowing young people to fight against one another. When considering what he did for his family and community, Abdir Rashid referenced duties and obligations. This is what we're supposed to be doing as black men, you know? He also expressed deep love for and aspirations from his comrades. His community and his family were his strength. Dr. Janiri Jackson recalled that her young family did not have a chance to mature in the new African political science. On August 18, 1971, shootout in Jackson took place when her daughter was only 2. 2 months later, her husband, Michael Finney, and 2 comrades made their way to Jackson, Mississippi under the auspicions of helping the provisional government. Jackson did not learn until years later that the mission may have included liberating Amir Obadel from detention. Quote, you know that saying, quote, the old make the wars and the young fight them, end quote. She stated, pain still in her voice for decades later. It was partly this experience that dissuaded the, quote, wife of the brother, end quote. That was not good. That was AAVE. Sorry, everybody. Who hijacked the plane to Cuba from taking the oath of citizenship. That decision also came from her critiques of patriarchy and sexism, and feeling of abandonment by the provisional government during her time of great need, and her growing distaste for pledging alliances to any entity, whether it be United States of America, the Mormon Church, or the RNA. This is not to say that Jackson's viewed everyone who worked towards New African independence disapprovingly. In fact, she was a lifelong friend with people who went out of their way to take care of her and her toddler, emotionally and economically, while Finney was sitting in a Cuban prison awaiting a decision on his fate. People like Yusafa Sanbiate Akbar and Kristen Clinge Williams, Reverend Clinge's daughter. Quote, quote, these are at the heart, I think, of a fundamental quest for a better world, end quote. When her family was suffering in the aftermath of an act that some consider criminal and others heroic, these were the people who helped her navigate the tumult of the time. New African spirituality. Well, let's see. Yes, this is in the discourse. This is in the discourse. Discord. Oh my God. Hold on a second. Just looking back. Wait, what? What's it say? What is this dude doing? Weird. Alright. New African spirituality. Now, I personally don't believe in spirituality. I don't believe in spirits, but this is not me. This is important for that culture, for the culture. Now, me personally, I don't, but unlike the New African family, there are no stipulations or precepts that guide people towards a singular entity called New African.
Mail one, so that's how they got me for $2,000.
Jeez.
Yeah. And then I got home that night and I was like, son of a...
All of our activity, economic and non-economic, in short, the purpose of life shall be solved. Shall be to solve the mysteries of life and death. The claim echoes that the Republic of New Africans Declaration of Independence and the New African Creed and finds complementary references to biblical scriptures at the opening of some of Armand Obadele's published text. Brothers Amir and others had at one point likened nation building to a large divine purpose of revealing humans of oppression and hunger so they could more fully pursue spiritual enlightenment and elevation. But they never restricted individual spirituality to any one approach or religion. Instead, they embraced people's rights to choose their own religious ideologies. Therefore, people brought Christianity, Islam, Yoruba, Akan, and other religious systems and atheism into the movement. Doing so made sense because activists envisioned the Republic of New Africa as a revolutionary socialist republic, not a theocracy, which allowed people with the range of spiritual worldviews to bring their varying perspectives together in relative harmony. Afric stated that he was, quote, involved with African spirituality for a large incumenical vein, but I'm still in AME Church because I believe that there's hope. Claimed that he participated in the work King and the other preachers did to make the Christian church useful to the black community. Afric stated, quote, I am not going to turn the other cheek and that kind of stuff. I respect him for what he believed, what he lived, and what he was prepared to die for. Speaking as a lifelong member of the AMC Church, Afric argued, quote, that to me is where AME Church has failed because we still in the church, as opposed to feeding and clothing people out in the community. Quote, you talk about Christ. Christ was a revolutionary. He was an activist. He was out there with the people, end quote. When he was still based in Chicago, Baba Hannibal was able to take some of his community programs to the AME Church. Had I not brought programs to the church in Chicago, they wouldn't have been accomplished if I were outside the church. Afric made full use of Christianity as a tool for the New African Revolution, although he remained a member of the AME Church and believed that revolutionaries must be more involved with the church in order to accomplish some of their goals. He also came to embrace African spirituality, especially that practiced by the AKANs. Akan. In these ways, he maintained a connection with an institution through which he believed he could create programs and propagate the idea of the New African Independence Movement. Further, he could nourish his spiritual connections with his ancestors and bonds with other Africans across the world. Other New Africans have also learned to embrace African spirituality, sometimes along with Christianity and other times by itself. For example, Sister Nikchi Tafa exclaimed that she attended Sunday schools in her childhood and youth, but came to practice African spirituality, oh my gosh, in her adulthood. Ugh. Not restricted to any one spiritual outlooks, she participated in both the Yoruba and Akan temples. On the other hand, Soku Awusio never got into any religious. After he left the Catholic Church, he never embraced Islam, which was popular among many of his associates, and he did not look for any other forms of Christianity. He had enough religion and did not want any more, kind of like me. Instead, he was drawn to the ideas that emphasize the power of divinity of each individual. Quote, ancient Kemet talks about becoming gods, and you work on your internal stuff to raise your consciousness. I'm kind of on that bent, end quote. He also expressed some openness towards West African religious traditions that his comrades embrace. The Fergusons, Jackson, and Trace also had their fill of Christianity, although to varying degrees and with different outcomes. Whereas Bobby Herman claimed not to know anything about the Almighty God, Mama Yawalua, and Jackson did not completely discredit the idea of serving the purpose of a higher power. Instead, both described themselves as agnostic, with Jackson finding spiritual power and fulfillment through yoga, meditation, and holistic health. Finally, Trace stayed away from Christianity for the significant portion of his adult life because of his painful childhood experiences in Catholicism. However, he did try to find ways to develop spiritual understanding by reading various religious and spiritual texts. Trace started, quote, I read the Quran, I read the Bible, I read the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and the Kabbalah. Before becoming a Baptist in 2001, he eventually became a deacon, taught Sunday school, and ran several ministries in his church. Several others embraced Islam at various points of their lives. One of Abdur Rashid's favorite aunts affiliated with the Nation of Islam and offered him the alternative worldview. Though she never spoke directly to him about Islam, she left the NOA, Nation of Islam newspaper within his reach. He recalled being impressed by the brothers who worked for your cleaners, the Nation of Islam's cleaning service. He quote, found them to be kind of impressive too, with their suits and their ties and their mannerisms, end quote. However, Khalid never joined the Nation of Islam because he didn't believe in some of the doctrine, but he respected their mannerisms and courtesies. Bilal Sunni Ali embraced Islam as a youth, but Godwin Zoran Simmons learned about Sufis as an adult. Others accepted Islam through the Nation of Islam and found variations of the religion that suited their needs. All right, I gotta take something. I'm having bad acid reflux. I hate acid reflux. It's so annoying. Ugh. Yeah, not a lot of people like this book, I don't think. Like many of those presented here, they were dissatisfied with Christianity because of the perceived contradictions and unanswered questions. It is likely that some of them, similar to Yalua Ferguson and Saku Owisu, just could not accept the religion, but embraced Islam as a way to connect with something more meaningful and more consistent in their views of black liberation. Of the people interviewed for this study, only Elder Balogun claimed that his contacts within the New African Independence Movement aided in the development of his spirituality by exposing him to new ways of approaching religion. Quote, will you know at this time, man and I really kind of experimenting. Like I said, Babe Adafunima was a Yoruba priest. I was looking into Orias, Voodoo, and some remnants of Islam and Buddhism. And then, like I said, the Pan-African Christian Orthodox Church was getting started then. So I was looking into that. He learned through his interconnections, his interactions with these people and institutions, that with, quote, as many ways to the Creator as there are, all roads eventually lead to him anyway. From that perspective, he came to believe that there was no reason for choice in any religious or spiritual worldview over another. Quote, I don't consider myself a religious person, but I am more spiritual now. That's becoming the acceptable thing. But I am open-minded about all religious endeavor. I can't say that there was one that I favored above others. I still tap my foot to the shake of my head and walk back and forth to the gospel tune. To a gospel tune. God dang. Whew. Can't wait till this hits. And you know what I'm saying. But I can also feel something when it's a call to prayer in Arabic. Elder Balungon seems to approach religious and spirituality in a manner similar to provisional government, which as a pre-governmental body for the nation, not a theocracy, never dictated that its citizens adhere to any one religious worldview, and belief in the radical political nation is a dominant ideal within the new African independence movement. Hold on. Every time I'm reading, I have this influx of acid reflex. It's annoying me because it's causing me to burp. New Africans created new frames through which people would come to understand many aspects of their ideology and lifestyles. Through lifestyle choices were not a single most important factor of their struggle for independence. Each person's experience as a racialized, gendered, and classed being in the United States prior to becoming involved in the New African Independence Movement helped shape how they understood everything, from education and spirituality to family to career paths, and was their understanding of their own life experiences, along with their observation about the broader society, that informed their decision to become active in the New African Independence Movement. And it was based on this understanding that these activists then decided to revision their families, reimagine their life's work, and made other quadrants but significant choices about their lives. They took such ideas and attitudes into the movement, where they inevitably had a profound influence on the provincial government and on the New African Independence Movement. Hold on a second, everybody. I'll be right back. All right. Sorry, I had to try to remove this acid reflex. I don't know what's going on. Whew. For example, African Americans studies scholars John Bracy recalled a movement at the Black Government Convention when Queen Mary Moore, Gadi Odella, and Obasanjo Adefunmi debated which religion would provide the most opportunities for New Africa. or New Africans. Similarly, New Africans had conversations and debates about how culture, education, and many other aspects of human life would be potentially liberatory or oppressive. New Africans negotiated their pre-activist orientations, those outlooks and principles that they developed through their experiences in a racist, sexist, and capitalist society. Their worldviews as adults and the daily challenges of being New Africans in the United States, which made for a dynamic process through which they developed new understandings that they then applied to their activism. It was a total cynical process, cyclical process. One not one way cause activism and affect biographical impacts. That is where the power of lifestyle politics resides. How New Africans decided to live out their ideologies, guided their practices, became an important site of tension and agency that allowed activists to begin exercising self-determination, even as they resisted the violent dominations of the United States and its citizens. God dang. Oh, this burping needs to stop. Another major influence of activists' lives was their relationship with state agencies' responsibilities for policing the country, and stopping people and ideas that threaten to undermine the status quo. New Africans, much like their predecessors and peers, had to endure a routine and sometimes brutal repression that played no small part in preventing them from achieving their goals. Even though they were aware and tried to anticipate a range of government actions, they did not fully theorize and prepare for the maleficent onslaught that they ultimately experienced. To be sure, local and national policies, agencies, and their strategies and tactics for undermining New African independence efforts had an impact on the movement and on the activist lifestyle politics. Chapter 5. How many more chapters? Just curious. So 2 more chapters. Just curious. Oh my gosh. COINTEL got black people in hell. It's probably COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO. There we go. State repression and black liberation. I didn't know about COINTELPRO when, I'm guessing that's going to come up a lot. When, then. But I knew something was amiss. The United States of America would have you believe that I am a criminal, that we are all criminals. That just isn't so. Geronimo Jaga. I am a New African soldier, and we have an absolute right to fight for our freedom. What is necessary to exercise that right is to stand up like men and women to exercise it. Saku Obinga. All right, here we go, everybody. Here I'm gonna go. I'm gonna mess up a whole bunch of names. I'm so sorry. Faluna Sunni Ali lived on a farmhouse in an area called Birdtown, located in Galman, Mississippi, with her elderly father Abi Aljo, Abdullah, and Jerry Gaines, another New African woman. Together they ran one of the provincial government's education program for children on their property. On October 28, 1981, at approximately 8 a.m., about 200 federal agents from several states, armed with tanks, machine guns, helicopters, raided the property. They handcuffed and arrested everyone, including the children. save 2 infants at gunpoint. What? The suspicion that Sunni Ali had conspired with Black Liberation Army members in the recent expropriation, quote unquote, of an armored brink truck in upstate New York inspired the raid and rough treatment, while justifying their actions to the public. The FBI renounced that they uncovered a cache of weapons at the rural Mississippi home. That cache included 3 .22 squirrel rifles used to hunt small game and a 2 large caliber rifle. Each weapon was generally registered and none had been involved in any crimes. The FBI relabeled Sunni Ali, as they had done with all the expropriation suspects, a terrorist. Although the state soon had to drop its original conspiracy charges against Sunni Ali, the state decided to use another legal tactic to harness and intimidate her. That December, at subpoenaed her to participate in a grand jury investigation of the expropriation, viewing the grand jury as an attempt to intimidate her and other movement activists and as a method of placing her at odds with her comrades. Sunni Ali refused to cooperate. Oh my gosh, stop burping up. She determined that it was better to remain steadfast in her convictions and to maintain her trust of her comrades, even at the expense of her personal freedom. The federal government used her resistance as another opportunity to prosecute her and jail her, taking her from her loved ones and educational work. FBI press release and media coverage of the raid and the circumstances surrounding the single some limits to self-definitions and the complicated and interactive process by which identity construction occurs. Jesus. Although the methods by which New Africans organize and express their collective identities and lifestyles are important, forces outside of the movement also played an important role. Entities like the FBI, local policing agencies, and press influence collective identity through the development of, quote, altered versions. If those entities considered New Africans as criminals, Black militants bent on destroying America, and as cop killers, then such images would partially influence New African collective identity constructions on social political positioning and daily life choices. Altered versions helped justify repressive actions targeting New Africans and placed a range of limitations on them. Although New Africans' responses and reactions to repressions helped shape the New African independence movement, such impediments were not strong enough to stop the movement. To be sure, New Africans prefigured government repression in their strategies. Just months after National Black Government Convention, Detroit citizen Warren Galloway reportedly believed that the Republic of New Africans, RNA, was completely infiltrated by representatives of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and the Centers of Intelligence Agency at CIA, the Michigan State Police, and Detroit Police Department. He indicated that he personally was endeavoring to ascertain the identity of those informants and identified FBI informant delivered his interpretation of Galloway's commitments to the Detroit Bureau Office without a hint of irony. Galloway's statements and the reporting of it reflected the general security consciousness of New African independence activists. Although such such forethought and its concomitant planning brought them relatively little ability to prevent or withstand state repression, and the notion factored into the construction of new African ideology and identity. As a captive nation, New Africans used the reality of repression as a reminder of their conditions and the need to change it through independence. They also used it to justify some of their military actions. Both perceived, what time is it? I need to leave what time it is real quick. Oh, there it is. We're white, but yes, I agree, black people deserve this. But both perceived the actual repression had an impact on psychological as well as physical on people who were attempting to bring their goals of self-determination and a new society to fruition. In fact, that aspect of repression is important because it provides a glimpse into one of the many ways that social movement participation led to the detainment, injury, and death of activists and their loved ones. For example, one aim of government repression was to create further fear and discourse among targets. After the raid on the RNA home at Birdtown, it is reasonable to assume that the children suffered in immeasurable ways due to the disruption that the raid caused in their lives and their treatment at the hand of law enforcement, because one of the key adults was immediately taken from loved ones, and the other adults were no doubt forced to reconsider their participation in the Provincial Government Republic of New Africa, PGRNA. The raid reminds us that black activists, including New Africans, were subject to a laundry list of repressive action, including continuous surveillance and harassment by police, media smearing, and even murder. The primary reason New Africans antagonists went to such great lengths to undermine activists was because of activists' ideas ran counter to American status quo. Although those who opposed them labeled New Africans and others as violent-prone criminals and sometimes terrorists, the potential for violence mattered less than the threat of their ideas. That political alternatives to the status quo exist and sometimes gain traction made them worthy of neutralization. As one supporter stated, quote, "The message is this: you cannot oppose the policy of the U.S. government. You cannot resist these governmental declarations of war. And if you do, we will send an army to terrorize you, your family, and any other supporters." By the 1980s, the provincial government, Republic of New Africa, was able to determine through the Freedom of Information Act the full extent that they were targeted and attacked by, quote, one of the most bizarre and sinister and illegal plots of the COINTELPRO era. By that point, their efforts were stalled. Supporters distanced themselves from black left activism. Several self-determined Republic of New African citizens were wards of the states of recent parolees. Nevertheless, the independence movement would outlive the era that birthed it. All right, let me look ahead real quick. At 20 minutes. Page 177. Look, there's one person in here. Yay! 177. 177. 177. Okay, 177 to 77. 6 more pages. We should do that. 177. All right, here we go. FBI repression of black revolutionaries. From its inception of 1906, the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, called the Bureau of Investigation until 1935, viewed the political left as dangerous and oft un-American, along with anarchist socialists from Europe, as well as striking factory workers. Dissidents of African descent required special resources for control and neutralization, at least according to the FBI, alleging that dissatisfied black women and men were the political dupes of the Soviets. The FBI took various actions against any efforts that challenged the racial and economic status quo, including on the Bureau radars, where Marcus Garvey and the University of Black Improvement Association, UNIA, a Philip Randolph, Dr. Martin Luther King, the National Association for Advancements of People of Color, the NAACP, the Chicago Defenders, the multiple other individual organization. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover and his agents initiated a counterintelligence program, or COINTELPROS, against them, even as Bureau refused to investigate in earnest the rampant murders and other abuses that victimized black people across the nation. The director and his agents viewed black people as potential threats to the nation, not a group in need of protection. The purported inability to safeguard African Americans from terrorism and its own repressive actions against those desiring equal rights within the U.S. political structures. God damn, I'm tired of this. Revealed that the Bureau's agenda was to keep African Americans in a position of subjugation. The fear of the black activity led the Bureau's formal launch of a COINTELPRO against black nationalists, hate type, quote unquote, individuals and groups. In August 1967 followed several waves of urban rebellions in black communities. Hoover nearly doubled the FBI activities, an extensive network of agents, informants, police, media personnel, utilities operators, pub owners, and market vendors helped surveil and neutralize civil rights and black power activists. Hoover ordered his field offices to develop imaginative means to prevent the rise of a black quote unquote messiah, and to maintain the racial political order. Agents' methods were effective in that their actions resulted in grave bodily harm, psychological trauma, imprisonment, and or death for African Americans whose major crimes were their insistence on exercising their civil and human rights and self-determination through peaceful or violent means. Field offices in various locales worked together to spy on one level on high profile targets such as Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture. The FBI had CIA surveilled Carmichael in the United States and monitored his activities abroad. In 1970s, the Senate Subcommittee of Investigation and Administration of the Internal Security Act and other internal security laws summoned him to testify about his activities. He and other public targets are representative of a much larger program of monitoring and policing of black bodies by Uncle Sam. Yet such monitoring was not reserved only for known radicals. The FBI spied on entire black communities from Watts to Harlan to Bronzeville and the Ninth Ward, allegedly to identify the people who agitated for the participated in urban rebellions, other forms of dissent. This Bradith made potential targets, their neighbors, and their families, the subject of memos that landed on Hoover's Washington, D.C. desk. Reported surveillance even extended to black-owned stores, neighborhoods, social spaces, and cooperative businesses. Consider the scope of this COINTELPRO. It seems that the entirety of Black America was a target. One such example as the African Student Association, ASA, in Pasadena, California. Members of the organizations advocated for self-determination and boosted friendships with Jonathan Jackson and Angela Davis, potentially associated with the US organization, the US organization, and expressed goals that aligned with the New African Independence Movement. Their willingness to consider New African program and goals earned the organization's attention in FBI documentation and made certain that the people who lent meeting spaces became targets for deeper research. Although the available documents do not detail how agents gathered further information about the people they added to their indexes, it is safe to assume that their methods include interviews with employers, friends and relatives, and even the targets. Gathering intelligence on the ASA fell into what social scientists designated as intelligence covert action, quote unquote. They also identified two other categories, including legal repression and violence. Some scholars also break repression down into, quote, soft and hard repression. The former is typically covert, includes regular monitoring and infiltration by informants and agents, badjacketing, defamation in the local and national press, and making targets and aviators the recipients of bogus mail. Hard or overt repression included harassment, arrests, raids, and violent against intended targets. Jesus. As targets of many such actions by the state, New African independence advocates lost opportunities to organize and express periods of strategic stagnation. Repression shaped in part the development of New African collective identity and therefore lifestyle politics. FBI documents on the Henry Brothers, the group on advanced leadership goal, and their affiliates provided ample evidence that even before they championed armed revolution, people would become New African citizens were targets of state repression. For example, the FBI monitored Betty Shabazz, whose life was of interest to the state since at least 1958. They kept tabs on where she lived, where she traveled on a daily basis, when she married Malcolm X, when she became pregnant with her children, and with whom she communicated, including the mayor of New York City, because she was the wife of Malcolm X. One might expect, if with disgust, such a high level of surveillance on her, even down to such a personal issue as her pregnancy. Perhaps it is to be expected that, like Sister Betty, Goal and the Henry Brothers in Detroit were targets of FBI monitoring and infiltration. The Henrys had decades of experience challenging white supremacy. The feds took interest in these activists, public proclamations, and relationships between Goal activists with the Revolutionary Actions Movement, RAM. In Detroit and in Cleveland, and the aforementioned of their above ground self-defense clubs, the Bureau was especially on edge about the latter. In the, quote, urgent memo, Hoover ordered field agents to get information not only to verify the formations of Medgar Evers Rifle Club, but also to conduct background checks on informants and police officers monitoring Goal. Jesus, this is not going away. Ooh. Although these examples, as well as these examples, Although these examples, as well as that of Betty Shabazz, did not include any recommendations for violence against their targets, they are indicative of how agents of the state constructed alter versions and activists and their families, even the unborn ones. In addition to identifying activists and assessing when as potential threats to national security, policing agencies framed any acquiring information in ways that created fearsome images of activists. If they could convince the public that revolutionaries were violent black criminals, that would deter potential members and allies. Although it is impossible to accurately quantify the state's success, current scholarships agrees that surveillance was a necessary component of policing agencies' neutralization programs. By nurturing a culture of fear, they prepared for more obvious malicious forms of repression, including letter writing, rumors, legal repression, and eventually physical violence. FBI and police infiltrations of New Africans in Detroit was indicative of the movement's compromised security. Gosh, dude, I wish this would stop. However, New Africans lived all over the country and were mobile. So, too, were agents of the state who followed Dr. Gwynandon Zorhan Simmons, on one-time supporter of the provincial government and the citizens of record. Dr. Simmons recounted an experience during which she drove from Cleveland to Detroit for an RNA event. She and her 3 passengers, all New African citizens, noticed that someone was following them. The New Africans could not verify who their pursuer were. However, they, quote, were white men in suits. Every time we stopped to get gas, they stopped. Dr. Simmons was convinced that men wanted the travelers to know they were under surveillance. Quote, I was terrified of what was going to happen, she explained. However, surveillance seemed to be the extent of their activity that day. Regardless of who the unidentified men were, Dr. Simmons perceived them as agents of the state assigned to monitor her and other RNA citizens. Being surveilled was blatantly causing her distress, not least because her comrades were armed and prepared for the possibility of confrontation like their stalkers. Marilyn Killingham was sure of who was monitoring her, as well as their intentions. She claimed that the FBI, quote, wanted you to know that they were following you. When they changed shifts with their cars that were following you, they made sure that you saw them. I mean, they wanted to run you wild. They wanted to harass you. They wanted to hurt you and make you hurt yourself. If, as Killingham and Dr. Simmons claim, the state wanted activists to know that they were being followed and monitored, it raises the question, why? What did the agents hope to gain from such visibility? Ward Churchill and Jim Vanderwall indicated that the purpose was to induce paranoia in political activists. Quote, making them aware they'd be selected to special treatment and that there was an FBI agent behind every mailbox. Such paranoia would exacerbate inevitably personality conflict and would increase those tensions, straining already fragile relationships. One of the FBI's stated goals was to deter its targets from gaining the support and potential allies. Robert Williams' distrust of people like Amir Obadel and other key citizens confirmed that if people saw the signs of monitoring and an infiltration, they would be more likely to stay away from compromised groups and individuals, and they had decades of experience to confirm the effects that great distress could bring about in their targets. Having knowledge that one was being watched, listened to, followed, and potentially targeted for violence increased the likelihood that that person would respond to the situation with actions that could easily justify greater repression. The arrest of Amin Obafemi and Tariq, misidentified in some sources as Malik Soyebowete, demonstrated how policing agencies use soft and hard repression simultaneously. In July 1972, Obafemi and Sonia Bateti attended a Miami Democratic National Convention as, quote, officials envoys of the RNA with orders to distribute literature to Senator Greg McGovern's headquarters, especially when they were circulating copies of the RNA anti-depression program, which outlined a plan of reparations. At one point, Obafemi attempted to approach the presidential candidate from South Dakota, but was apprehended by local authorities. It was rumored that Obafemi and Sonbayatea had planned to harm McGovern and others after security service agents found 2 handguns in their borrowed automobile. Fear of assassination attempts soon passed, but Obafemi and Sonbayatea did not win their release. Instead, they were each tried and convicted on 3 firearm charges and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Newspapers reported claims, matter of factly, that the FBI agents who had been surveilling those 2 people tipped off the secret agents that the 2 new Africans were worthy of a special vehicle search. No one questioned why the 2 men were under FBI surveillance or why the agents decided to make the Secret Service aware of their presence after joining the convention instead of running interference and searching them before they could potentially place convention goers in dangers. It seems that by the early 1970s, news media had accepted the idea that black nationalists were synonymous with criminals and therefore did not require an investigation with activists or FBI intentions. Another possibility is that certain papers and reporters were working with the FBI to develop and disseminate these ideas. Whatever the case, it is rather curious that the men were caught with concealed handguns at an event where there would surely be heightened security. The RNA Minister of Justice, Chokwe Lumumba, stated that McGovern, Humphreys, and the convention of Vice Chairwoman and several other political figures at this convention were appraised by the letter prior to the convention that we would be here and what we be about. Assuming those individuals received the communication, Obafemi and Sonbayatea, would have expected that their presence as new Africans at the political convention, especially months after Lewis Street shootout that resulted in their president's incarceration, would result in a greater scrutiny. Also, Obafemi and Sonbayatea's envoy assessment came just months after activists gained solid evidence that the FBI had played a major role in determining their activities. Therefore, some extra precautions, such as inspecting a borrowed vehicle or anything or any items that could possibly give state authorities just cause to apprehend and detain where in order. Finding or even possibly planting 2 handguns in the New Africans' borrowed car allowed the state to achieve 2 goals simultaneously. First, in detaining their targets, policing agencies and medias were able to build on their story of New Africans being criminals, possibly deterring potential allies from joining the independence efforts. Second, by placing them on trial in prison, and state effectively drained economic and human resources from the New African independence movement. For this reason, especially, legal repression was fruitful method for disrupting black revolutionaries. The legal process, as often lengthy, expensive, and in itself generated plenty of damning press release against trial defendants, even if the charges were later changed or dropped or convictions overturned. All right, last paragraph. The mixture of covert repression, legal actions, and unfavorable media attention all provided the state with elements they needed to create alter versions of New African collective identity, mobilizing alter versions, delegitimized, I can't say the damn word, New Africans and the goals of territorial liberation, projecting them as dangerous criminals and even terrorists. The U.S. government sought to deter people who may have agreed with the Republic of New Africans' goal from getting involved. The state simultaneously used the alter version to justify violent actions against New Africans and their allies. Personal recollections, newspaper articles, police, FBI documents, and recent scholarships all confirmed that the FBI was effective in its endeavors. Taking together these sources paint the comprehensive picture of how activist lifestyles were altered. And that's where I'll stop. Ugh, not doing good. I don't feel good. That's where I'll stop.